boy. Say hi. Hey everyone, it's Hailey, and today I'm going to be doing my September wrap-up. September is over, which is crazy, but that means it is fall, so I'm like, give me pumpkins or give me death. That is literally all I care about right now is fall. I love the colors of fall. I love fall. You guys probably know that by now, considering the fact that I've done a million fall-themed videos. But now it is like officially fall. But anyways, I can't waste time talking about that because I read 17 books in the month of September. So since I have so many books to talk about today, I'm not going to be able to give you guys a really in-depth synopsis or really in-depth thoughts, but I'm going to try and give you guys as much information as possible in a little amount of time. Also, if you guys wanted to keep up with my reading as it was happening, I will link my reading vlogs down below. I've been vlogging as I'm reading and doing other life things, so you guys can check that out if you're interested. So with that being said, let's wrap it up. Wrap it up. Boop, 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 boop. Oh my god. I was doing it because like rap, like yeah, no. Need to stop. So the first book that I ended up finishing in September was Love and Gelato by Jenna Evans Welch. This is a super cute summer contemporary that has some depth to it. It follows our main character whose mother has just died, and upon her death her mother has sent her off to Tuscany, Italy. So it was a really immersive travel contemporary, and it also did have more going for it, which I think is what made me really enjoy it, as well as the fact that the ending really went full circle. So I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Next I ended up reading Ever the Hunted by Erin Summerall. This is a YA fantasy kind of along the lines of quite a few other YA fantasies that I've read. It really reminded me of Hunted and A Court of Thorns and Roses, but it did also have its own unique elements going for it. That being said, I found my attention drifting quite a bit while I was reading this story. I guess I didn't really care for the characters enough, and I didn't really like the romance either. But it was a solid fantasy read, so I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Words in the Deep Blue by Kath Crowley. This is definitely a book that I have very mixed feelings on because I feel like it's one that I should have loved, but I didn't really. It's very much a bibliophile's paradise, as the setting is a secondhand bookstore, and it also has so many references to different books, not only like high lofty literature, what some would consider that, but also different YA books that you're sure to have most likely read or at least heard of. So I loved that element to it, but I found that it was very confusing. I didn't care for the writing style. I was kind of lost half of the time, and I felt like the author was trying to accomplish too much in too short of a book. So ultimately I ended up giving this a very confused 2.5 out of 5 stars. After that I picked up Long May She Reign by Rhiannon Thomas. This was a very pleasant surprise for me because I ended up really loving it. This book is pitched as a fantasy standalone, but the fantasy element is very low, so I think that's why a lot of people haven't really been enjoying it so much. It kind of reads a little bit more like a historical fiction, but it has an amazing main character who totally made the story for me. She has never really thought she would end up on the throne because she was so far down the line, but then this whole massacre ends up happening and she ends up finding herself as queen. But I ended up giving this book a 4 or maybe even a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next I picked up Disney's Alice in Wonderland, the Cinestory comic, which was so amazing. I loved this so much. It's basically the movie but in comic form, which is what it means by Cinestory comic, but it was just such a pleasure reading this. It was a super quick read obviously, but I absolutely loved every second of it. After that I read This Darkness Mine by Mindy McGinnis, which I absolutely I did not like this book at all. It made me very uncomfortable. I found that some things were kind of problematic. I talk about that a little bit more on my Goodreads, which is linked down below if you wanted to go and check that out. But all I'm gonna say is it just was so weird and blah. I can't even like form thoughts about it. I really did not like it, which is really disappointing for me because The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis was one of my favorite books of last year, so reading this and being so disappointed really sucked. Next I picked up Top 10 by Katie Contugo. This was, believe it or not, my first Katie Contugo novel, and I ended up enjoying it. I didn't really love it because I found that I didn't connect with the characters a lot, and I think that is just because of the format the story was told in. So it's looking back at their top 10 moments of high school, and it's these two best friends, and it's kind of looking at, are they best friends, are they more, all that stuff. It was a refreshing twist on the typical contemporary romance, so I liked that a lot, and I think I'll look at some of her other novels soon. So I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. Next I picked up The Sweet Fright Thing by Libba Bray, which is the conclusion to the Gemma Doyle trilogy, and I liked this. I found that Gemma Doyle became quite a bit more unlikable than she was in previous books, and this book is also so much longer than the other books, and it was really kind of unnecessarily so, and I'm one of those people who feels like a book should be as concise as possible. There's no need to be using all of this this extra stuff and just kind of lollygagging around the main point. Just kind of get to it, please. And this one really took a long time to get to it, so it kind of was just a little bit disappointing. But I am glad that I finished the trilogy. I liked it overall, and I'm glad that this is finally off of my TBR because it is huge. So I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. Next I read Roar by Cora Carmack. This is one that I really wanted to love because it's this fantasy world where there's these different like stormlings and this storm magic. It seems really cool and unique, but I just found that the story, all of its potential was lost because it focused so much on the romance. And Cora Carmack does have usually very heavy romances. I haven't seen her write any other fantasies, anything out of the contemporary genre, but this just didn't do anything for me. I don't normally mind romances, but lately I've become so critical of the language that's used in romances, and this featured very possessive language which just had me cringing the entire time, and it kind of got like that right out of the gate, so I was literally just rolling my eyes 99% of the time. But I did like the magic. I just wish it had been more of a focus, and then I think it could have reached more of its potential. So I ended up giving this a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Next I ended up reading Warcross by Marie Lu, which I absolutely loved. It was so good. I was like so pleasantly surprised by it. I don't know why, but I was kind of apprehensive going into it, but it was amazing. And I know so many people have been saying that, but it really was. It's all about this virtual reality game and this bounty hunter who's sent on a mission into this game in this tournament. It is crazy, so inventive, very cool. And my one complaint was the fact that I found a lot of times I had to read over sentences, especially in the world building, to kind of get my mind wrapped around what was happening technology wise, because it's just very out there. So I don't know if that is just a me problem or if it's a writing problem, but because of that I ended up giving this a 4.75 out of 5 stars, or else this would have been easily a 5 out of 5 stars. Next I read Alice in Zombieland by Gina Showalter. This I did not like, and I was kind of expecting that, and it's partially my fault. So I don't like zombies, but because this is Alice, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna give it a go. But this is not at all an Alice in Wonderland retelling, which for me is very false advertisement. I know I could read the synopsis and see that, but when you name an entire series, the White Rabbit Chronicles, and when you have them all like Alice in Zombieland, there's a Queen of Hearts one, like when they all have Alice themed names, I'm automatically going to assume that it is an Alice in Wonderland retelling. So then I'm going to be interested in it, but it ended up just kind of being a high school melodrama that didn't really do a lot for me, so did not really like this, which kind of sucks, but oh well. A lot of you guys had wanted me to read this though, so now I have, and I'm sorry that I did not like it. So I gave this once again a 1 out of 5 stars. I had 2 1 out of 5 star books this month, which is crazy. Immediately after that I ended up reading Umberland by Wendy Spinelli, which is the second book to the Everland trilogy, and this one is a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, and it's an actual retelling of Alice in Wonderland, and I loved this so much. I have such a fun time reading this series, and this one I actually ended up listening to on audiobook, and I'm really glad that I did because it's a full cast audiobook, which I think just ups my enjoyment level like 100%, and it really was true of this book. It was such an amazing audiobook. The narrators did a great job with it, and I just was having such a great time reading this book. It's kind of funny that I find it to be such a fun series because it's very dark subject matter, but at the same time it manages to have kind of this light-hearted feeling but also this heavy feeling. It's very hard to describe, but it's one of my just kind of like, sometimes I want to escape reading a book to review it, and this series is a really good one to do that with. So I ended up giving this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next I read Vengeance Road by Erin Bowman. This is a YA Western, and I wish that I loved Westerns because I think if I did, I would have really loved this, but it's just not really my scene, so I didn't really end up liking this a lot. I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, but personal preference, it wasn't really my thing, but I think as a Western, as far as what I know about them, this was very well done. It had that vernacular, it had those Western vibes and kind of that true grit sort of thing. It just seemed like it would have been the perfect Western if I had liked Westerns. Next I read Wild Beauty by Anna Marie Miclemore, and I was very sad to say that I didn't give this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I ended up giving it like a 3.5 out of 5 5 stars, which is still a solid rating, especially given what a lot of the books that I've read recently have been rated, but everyone else has been giving this 5 out of 5 stars, and because I love magical realism so much, I thought this for sure would be an amazing book that I would love, but it was just so slow, and it took me a really long time to figure out what the point of the story was. The writing was beautiful, and I loved the family dynamics and the overall point once I actually got to it, but it just took me so long, and I felt like I was like endlessly digging for it and not really finding anything. Now, that is kind of a thing with magical realisms. They tend to be a little bit slower than the typical genre. You really have to be patient with it, and I was patient with it. It wasn't doing a lot for me in the between, and I was being patient, but I can only be so patient with a book when I'm like hundreds of pages into it and I still don't really know what the story is about. So for me, that's kind of a problem when someone is like, what's that book about? And I'm like, that's a very good question that you ask here, and I'm almost done the book. Like I said, once I did actually get into the story, I ended up enjoying a lot. It just took me way too long to get there, so unfortunately did not love it as much as everyone else has. Next, I read There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. I ended up picking this one up on a whim because I was looking for something quick, and Stephanie Perkins is so skilled at writing quick reads. I ended up reading this actually in the middle of the night, which was not a good choice because I'm an absolute chicken, so I was up for a very long time that night. But I ended up liking it. I didn't love it. I'm not super into the whole horror genre, but I'm not into the whole horror thing at all because, like previously mentioned, I'm a chicken. But I feel like if you were into the horror genre, you would really not like this because it's not super scary. It's more so the idea of the story that was freaking me out. It's more so gory, and I feel like it kind of read like what I would picture a typical old kind of slasher film being like, which is very corny and generic and romance focused and just like not really terrifying, which was fine for me because if it was really terrifying, I would have put it down. But my one main complaint about this is, like, I feel like to a certain extent, slashers thrive on mystery, and this one specifically was really relying on that mystery element, but then the mystery was solved very early on, which was kind of annoying. So I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. And finally, I read Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. I actually listened to the audiobook for this, and I liked it. I loved the way that the relationships ended up going in this story. I liked reading from Kael's perspective. That was really cool. And I feel like he did kind of show glimpses of him being the Kael that I knew from before, so he started winning over my heart again, and we got to see some old characters from other books that I absolutely loved, and one of them is one of my absolute favorite characters, so that was really nice. And I thought this was good. It was so long, and it really didn't need to be, which kind of turned me off a little bit. So like I said, I listened to the audiobook for this one, and I think closer to the release of the next Throne of Glass book, I will actually physically read it. I'm definitely going to need a major refresher before jumping into the next book, so I feel like this will be good. So those are all of the books that I've read so far in September. I had an interesting reading month because I read quite a few books that I didn't really enjoy, but then I also read a couple of my favorite books that I've read so far this year. So it was really just a toss-up, but really that's how all months tend to go. So if you guys read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them, and let me know what your favorite book that you read in September was. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!